They fired me the night before my breakthrough project was set to launch. I left the building in silence, betrayed by my own team, coffee stains burning on my skin. Every ounce of my hard work ripped from my hands. But I wasn't even out of the parking garage when my life took a turn no one expected. The CEO of our biggest rival rolled down his window and offered me the chance to make my former company regret ever underestimating me. Hi, I'm Coraline. I was erased, dismissed, and humiliated right before my biggest moment. What would you do if the people you trusted most destroyed everything you built, only for destiny to give you the perfect shot at payback? Ever had your talent stolen, or watched someone else claim your spotlight? How would you fight back if the tables turned in an instant? Drop your story in comments. Because sometimes revenge is served cold, and opportunity knocks when you least expect it. Let me take you back to the moment everything unraveled. They fired me the night before I changed the game. That was their last mistake. The boardroom smelled like stress disguised as espresso, sharp, over-roasted, and burnt. Overhead, the LED lights buzzed just slightly off frequency. A row of framed, Employee of the Quarter plaques lined the hallway outside. My name had never appeared on them. Inside, the tension felt staged. Everything was perfect. Clean glass table, gleaming projector, company-branded notepads untouched. As I entered, a few eyes glanced up and immediately glanced back down. Chandler typed something into his tablet and smirked. Jaleesa didn't even look up. I placed the printed slides on the center of the table. My hands were steady. My voice wasn't trembling. Not yet. Coraline, Jaleesa said, her tones surgically cheerful. We've decided Chandler will be presenting Cora tomorrow. He brings a fresher energy. I blinked. He didn't write the model. I replied evenly. He can't explain half the regression parameters without reading my notes. Chandler laughed. Relax, we're on the same team. I just polished it, made it digestible. You know, for humans. No one corrected him. No one even shifted in their seats. I looked around the room. Board members, directors, 2 interns awkwardly holding lattes. I recognized one of them.
Maya.
She looked at me, then looked away. Jaleesa stood up, gliding around the table like she was presenting at TechWest already. It's not personal. We just need new faces leading innovation. Then she gave me that smile, the one she used in investor reels and HR brochures. The smile she wore when she erased people. I stood my ground. I built every variable in that model. Every predictive node. He wouldn't know how to replicate the output if I deleted one row. Jaleesa's tone stayed calm. Then you should be proud we're using your foundation. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't being overlooked. I was being extracted. They'd taken what they needed, and now I was a liability. I turned to leave. Jaleesa called out, "Wait, one more thing." She walked toward me holding her usual, extra hot oat milk latte. Her heels clicked against the tile like a countdown. Then it happened. Her foot caught the edge of the carpet, a movement too perfect, too rehearsed, and the cup flew out of her hand. Coffee splashed across my skirt, seeping instantly into the fabric, scalding hot and dark as molasses. For a second, silence. Then Chandler laughed under his breath. A VP stifled a chuckle. One of the interns gasped but didn't move. "Oops," Jaleesa said, eyes wide, tone syrupy. "Still your favorite, right?" Something inside me shifted. Not rage, clarity. I slowly reached into my coat pocket and clicked on the voice recorder on my phone. No dramatic gestures. Just precision. Jaleesa extended a folder. "Actually, this works out. The board has signed off on your transition out. We appreciate your contributions, Coraline." I took the folder, eyes locked on hers. Her hand trembled slightly, as I held her gaze.
I didn't argue.
I didn't speak. I turned around and walked out, each step echoing in the overly quiet hallway. As I passed Maya near the brake station, she looked at me like she wanted to say something. Her mouth opened slightly. Then Chandler appeared behind her, and she dropped her eyes to the floor. I paused at the elevator.
Press the button.
The light blinked slowly, rhythmically. I took out my phone and emailed a backup of the full Cora model to my personal cloud, attaching an encrypted note. Contingency proof, 10:42 p.m. As I waited, I caught my reflection in the elevator's mirrored door. Wet skirt, blank expression, hand still clenching a USB drive. Not rage. Not defeat. Calibration. The elevator opened. I descended in silence. The lobby was quiet, too quiet. Even the security guard didn't look up. Outside, rain pooled over the concrete in rippling circles. The parking garage glowed under dim industrial lighting, half the bulbs flickering like broken truth. A black SUV idled near the exit ramp, engine humming low. As I approached, the passenger window lowered. Silas Kincaid sat inside. Sharp suit.
No tie.
Calm eyes. Get in, he said, like it was a mission briefing. I'm not letting them bury another genius. I hesitated for half a breath, then opened the door and slid inside. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was purposeful. I held the USB like a detonator. 10 minutes later, the city lights flickered past in silence. Then Silas finally said, "How do you feel about launching it under a better name?" I turned toward him. He smiled, not corporate.
Real. Yours, he said.
Let's make sure they never forget it.
I didn't smile back.
I didn't need to. My silence was no longer submission, it was strategy. In my pocket was everything they thought they'd stolen. And this time, I wasn't handing it over quietly. You can burn the architect, but the blueprint still stands. Silas didn't talk much during the drive, and I didn't need him to. Everything I needed to know was already written in the way he offered silence. Not avoidance, but room. I spent so long shrinking inside the spaces others left me. Now I was being given space to expand. Westrick's HQ wasn't glass and marble like Vital Metrics. It was steel, dark wood, and matte black. Quiet, grounded power. Silas led me to the 28th floor, a corner office without a nameplate.
Yet.
He handed me a pass card. Temporary, he said, until we formalize. I raised an eyebrow. Formalize what? He gave the faintest smile. Your war plan. The next morning I wore black. No makeup. No need to perform. The minute I walked through the operations wing, eyes followed me. Not because I was famous, but because people could sense it. I was not here to adapt. I was here to dismantle. Silas called a private meeting with his legal and R&D heads. No assistants. No minutes. Just 5 people and 1 mission. I stood at the front of the room, pulled up the final version of Project Cora, every node, every variable, every single predictive model I had coded, refined, and documented. I zoomed into the metadata, timestamps, cloud logs, IP markers. Each one showed my name, my edits, my origin. They watched. No one interrupted. Vital Metrics released a platform this morning, I said. They're calling it CoreReach. The legal counsel flipped open her iPad, brows raised. It matches? 89% line for line, I replied. And the 11% is just branding fluff. My algorithm. My logic tree. Chandler Voigt changed the names, not the math. Silas turned to the team. Your thoughts? Litigation is possible, the legal lead said, but messy. Public. I don't want messy, I said. I want strategic. I want the truth out before they can gaslight the narrative. Then we go with a media counteroffensive, the comms director said. Public documentation, thought leadership articles, code comparison breakdowns. I nodded. I also want my own version launched before they can stabilize theirs. Same core, improved engine, cleaner interface. New name. Silas leaned forward. What do you want to call it? I smiled for the first time in days. Revanx. Revenge Nexus. He chuckled. Subtle. By noon, I had an entire dev team assigned. Not junior engineers either. Silas had given me his top architects. People who actually asked for my opinions, not just my spreadsheets. Maya, the intern from Vital Metrics, emailed me anonymously that afternoon. Her message was short. They're calling you a rogue technician. Thought you should know. Attached was a slide deck from Julissa, scheduled for release at TechWest in 3 days. It featured my graphs, my color scheme, my language. But this time, I wasn't going to send passive-aggressive emails or beg for credit. This time, I was going to bleed their version dry by letting mine go live first and better. Have you ever had your work or your reputation erased by the very people you trusted most? That kind of hurt that makes you question your own worth? If you've ever felt invisible or watched your effort get stolen, drop a comment with a number 7 below. Now, let's see how I choose to respond. At 5 p.m., we flipped the switch. Revanx went live with a clean interface, live demo simulations, and my name listed as lead architect. It was quiet, elegant, undeniable. 10 minutes later, a tweet exploded from the Westrix official account. Introducing REVNX, a predictive framework redefining regional market strategy. Built by Coraline Rhodes. Hashtag data ethics, hashtag real minds matter. It trended in 42 minutes. At 6:30 p.m., Silas's PR head sent me a screenshot. Vital Metrics had issued a rushed internal memo telling staff not to engage in public commentary about CoreReach. By 7 p.m., a tech analyst compared the two products in a viral blog. REVNX is what CoreReach wishes it could be. One is built. The other is borrowed. I didn't comment. I didn't retweet. I simply sent an email to the C-suite distribution list at Vital Metrics. Subject: you recognize the work. Body: you just never wanted to admit whose hands built it. Let me help. Attachment: a time-stamped diff log showing 24 direct overlaps between CoreReach and REVNX. That night, Silas and I shared a drink in the rooftop lounge. You just made a $20 million problem for them, he said, swirling his whiskey.
They made it themselves, I replied.
I just handed them a mirror. He raised his glass. To reflections that bite. I clinked him without smiling. To silence those who learn how to speak. They didn't just steal my work. They tried to rewrite me out of my own story. That's when I decided to become the editor. After the REVNX launch, Vital Metrics went uncomfortably quiet. Not silence, but suppression. Their press release used phrases like co-development inspiration and natural market overlap. But those of us who build, we know the difference between parallel thought and blatant theft. Westrix HQ buzzed like a hive, but not chaotically. There was rhythm here, efficient movement, clicks of keyboards syncing like metronomes. I took over a secured project room facing the Chicago River. The walls were lined with white boards, the glass panels doubled as writing space. I filled them. 5 activity zones. 5 steps to the reversal. 1. Forensic documentation. I pulled up every iteration of Cora from my cloud archive. Drafts, comments, commit logs, each one stamped with my name. I lined them up against CoreReach's public API. The overlap wasn't just similar, it was insulting. Their devs hadn't even removed my original color coding logic. I dropped it all into a comparison deck with 3 layers: visual, functional, and forensic. Each line they copied was tagged with my original timestamp. I called the folder the mirror. 2. Internal strategizing. In the Westrick strategy room, I stood before Silas, Edric, and the comms lead. The space was clean, no distractions, just a single dim light on the table like a poker game. I clicked to the first slide. This, I said, is my architecture in their hands. Edric scrolled. Jesus. I clicked again. And this, I said, is them trying to bury me beneath my own work. Silas didn't speak, but the tension in his jaw shifted. Next move, he asked. Let the internet run the trial, I said. 3. Public dissection. By noon, Westrix published a clean, clinical blog. The truth behind the code, a timeline of intellectual theft. It was a masterclass in weaponized transparency. We included visual overlays, my dashboard beside Coreach's. A diff tool with yellow highlights lit up line after line. We didn't accuse, we compared. The data did the speaking. The comms team added a subtle animation. Every time a timestamp matched, it pinged like sonar. The entire post was built to feel like a revelation, not an accusation. 4. Controlled detonation. Within hours, LinkedIn lit up. One post from a former Vital Metrics investor read simply, "This isn't disruption. This is deception." Tech bloggers picked it up like it was blood in the water. TechPulse wrote, "She wasn't overlooked. She was overwritten." I watched it unfold from the internal comm screen. Hashtags trended. Hashtag name the builder. Hashtag REX not reach. Hashtag crediting Coraline. Inside Vital Metrics, Chandler tried to control the leak. Maya, now working freelance, forwarded me a screenshot of his Slack message. Delete anything that mentions Coraline from the repo history. Too late. 5. Final proof. Late that night, a Google Drive share popped up in my inbox. Anonymous. Inside, a screen recording of Chandler swapping my name on an old deck. A Slack chat. Just clean it up and make sure it doesn't scream Coraline. A memo from Julissa to the board. Coreach is 100% internally developed. I sent them to Edric with one line. We're done playing fair. Then I drafted one last email. No venom, no flourish. Subject, you knew.
Body.
Attached, you'll find records of your silence. You may not have authored the theft, but you funded it. And your complicity is now public. Attachment, the erasure report, PDF. That morning, headlines broke like glass under pressure. The woman they tried to delete just deleted their illusion. How Coraline Rhodes rewrote her own revenge. Screens in the Westrix media bay displayed dozens of news tickers. I stood in the middle of it all, surrounded not by people cheering, but by proof glowing on 20 screens. Later that evening, I returned to the rooftop. It was cold, quiet, the kind of night where the skyline feels like static. I held a printed copy of the article from Tech Insider. On the back, I scribbled one line. Truth doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be seen. Silas joined me, bourbon in hand. No glass for me. I just stood there. You've started a fire, he said. No, I replied, watching the headlines scroll on a muted screen behind us. I just removed the lid. It was always burning. They thought they were safe because no one was watching. So, I turned on the lights. A week after the REVNX storm, Vital Metrics decided to get clever. Julissa, in all her PR brilliance, announced a last-minute company-wide town hall. The invitation came with the usual hollow phrases: culture realignment, transparent leadership, unity and innovation. What it really meant: damage control. The company was bleeding, clients pulling out, investors going quiet, legal pressure mounting. She needed a reset button. and she thought a public display of control would save her. She forgot one thing. I don't lose ground twice. Westrix's legal team, led by Edric Hale, had been quietly collecting every internal leak. Maya, still working quietly as my embedded source, forwarded an internal schedule. Chandler Voight would be presenting a breakthrough data streamlining model during the town hall. A model suspiciously similar to a fake architecture draft I had left on a shared cloud folder 2 days earlier, unlabeled, deliberately flawed, and laced with a watermark in the formula metadata that read, "If you're reading this, you've already stolen it." It was bait, and they took it. I watched the town hall via internal stream from Westrix's secured viewing room, multiple angles, 2 feeds synced, my notebook open beside me. The stage was set, a sleek venue inside Vital's Seattle office. Blue backlighting, company banners, the kind of cold polish Julissa loved. She stepped up first, camera ready as always. "Now, more than ever," she said, "we're redefining leadership from within." Applause.
Soft. Trained.
"Fresh perspectives are what this company thrives on," she continued, gesturing toward Chandler. "And no one exemplifies that better than our own Chandler Voight." He stepped up, confident, blazer crisp, voice steady. "Today," he began, "I'm introducing a new framework that simplifies market behavioral mapping using enhanced variable clustering." I smiled. Slide 1 appeared. Generic title.
Fine.
Slide 2. Graphic model. Mine, but slightly recolored. Slide 3. Projection flowchart, with my signature error left intact. The kind of mistake no data scientist would miss. A missing modifier that would throw off prediction margins by 12%. And right below it, on the bottom left corner, faint but visible, CRWX Delta 001, my encoded signature. I sent the message. From Westrix's secure line, the town hall screen glitched for a moment, then resumed. On the next click, Chandler's slide deck suddenly crossfaded into a new screen. It displayed 2 versions side by side. Left, Chandler's slide, today. Right, file created by Coraline Rhodes, 2 days prior. The watermark pulsed red.
Slowly.
Undeniably.
The room gasped.
Then fell silent. From the back of the room, Edric stood. Calm, deliberate. "Mr. Voight," he said, voice carrying like a courtroom mic, "can you explain why the source file of this new framework matches a proprietary draft uploaded by Ms. Rhodes last Tuesday?" Chandler froze. His mouth opened, then shut again. Someone in the audience stood up. Another sat down. Julissa stepped forward, trying to control the moment. "I think what we're seeing is a misunderstanding." The screen cut again. A live feed appeared, me. I sat in front of a dark gray wall, Westrix pinned behind me, hands folded. I didn't need to raise my voice. "What you're witnessing," I said, "is not innovation. It's appropriation. And it's systemic." I paused. This file was deliberately seeded, containing fatal calculation errors and a proprietary watermark. Chandler didn't just present stolen work. He presented it without checking it. I leaned slightly toward the camera. "That's not innovation. That's incompetence."
Gasps.
Someone stood to leave. Then, one more slide appeared. Email screenshot. Internal. From Julissa to Chandler. Subject. Swap out her name. Body. Just clean it up. Make sure it doesn't scream Coraline. You could feel the oxygen leave the room. Edric spoke again. "As interim compliance counsel, I am opening a full internal audit, effective immediately. Mr. Voight, your access credentials are suspended pending investigation." Security escorted Chandler from the stage. No resistance. Just red ears and shame. Julissa didn't speak again. That night, I returned to my office at Westrix. A large envelope had been slid under my door. Inside, a printed copy of an anonymous complaint submitted by a Vital Metrics employee to HR 3 days earlier. It referenced the Chandler incident in full, including timecodes. At the bottom, in blue pen, the HR manager had written, "Filed under review." But someone had already added a sticky note. "Not the first time she's done this." The louder they denied, the harder the silence hit them when the door finally closed. After Chandler's public unraveling, the dominoes didn't just fall, they imploded. Half of Vital Metrics' senior management went dark. Investors demanded clarity. Legal teams went into triage mode. But Julissa? She doubled down.
She always did.
3 days later, I received a call from Edric. "It's happening," he said. "Boardroom. Full review. You'll be there." It wasn't a request. I arrived early at the Westrix Heli Lounge where Silas had arranged for me to be flown in. Not because it was flashy, but because he knew this wasn't business. This was war, and I had earned a warrior's entrance. The boardroom at Vital Metrics was colder than I remembered. Not in temperature, but in presence. A massive black-graying conference table ran down the middle of the room, lit by narrow track lights overhead that threw sharp slants of white against the matte surface. The windows were partially dimmed to shield from the morning glare, and still, the tension outshone everything else. You could almost hear the static hum between egos and agendas. I walked in. No escort. No permission. Just footsteps and intent. Julissa's face didn't twitch, but her knuckles whitened on the edge of the table. Seated around her were 6 board members, including our mother, CEO Emeritus, former silent partner, current disappointment in human form. She wore a charcoal blazer, crisp, guarded. Her lips were drawn into a line as tight as her belief in Julissa. The meeting opened with empty updates, Q1 projections, client reassurance scripts, a sanitized financial forecast. Words that meant nothing. Then Edric cleared his throat and changed everything. "We've convened this review due to recent discoveries regarding intellectual property misconduct, project misattribution, and internal manipulation of recognition frameworks." Julissa didn't flinch. "Those accusations remain under investigation. We've made clear our intent to cooperate." I didn't look at her. I addressed the board. "With all due respect," I said, "you weren't misled. You were complicit."
A pause.
I opened my laptop and mirrored the screen to the central projector. The lights dimmed. Have you ever reached a moment where you decided, enough is enough, and stood up for yourself, even if your voice shook? That instant when you chose to speak your truth, no matter the risk? If you've been there, leave a comment with the number 9 below. Let's find out what happens when the truth is finally revealed. Exhibit A. I began. A full timeline of Core Reach's development blinked onto the wall. Yellow markers highlighted key overlaps with my original files, creation dates, Slack thread excerpts, source code attribution removals.
I didn't need to narrate.
The timeline spoke fluently. Exhibit B. A video loaded. Julissa's voice echoed across the room. "Clean it. Strip the original metadata. She's too emotional to fight this anyway." Gasps cut through the dim. Exhibit C. A spreadsheet. Column header. Q4 retention risk. Line 7, Coraline Roads. Asset valuable, but difficult to control. Recommend phase out. Julissa Keegan. I stood back. This wasn't about business efficiency. This was about removal. Julissa finally broke her silence. "You manipulated this. These files, this theater, it's all been orchestrated to frame me." I turned. "Frame you? You wrote the script. I just brought the receipts." Silas leaned forward, eyes on the board. Westrix holds controlling interest since acquisition. This is not consultation. This is declaration. Our mother looked at Jaleesa. Is any of this falsified? A beat.
2.
No, she said, voice flat. The chairwoman of the board adjusted her glasses. Effective immediately, Jaleesa Keegan is removed from all executive functions pending independent review. A full audit of promotions and project authorship will commence within 48 hours. Security entered without theatrics. Jaleesa stood, calm mask cracking just slightly at the eyes. Her gaze searched for someone to defend her. No one did. As she passed me, she hissed, "You think you've won?" I looked at her. Full eye contact, no flinch.
No.
I think I finally stopped losing. The door clicked shut behind her. The lights brightened. The room didn't. The board murmured among themselves, uncertain whether to acknowledge or retreat. Only our mother remained seated. Her posture was straight, voice quiet. "You've changed." "No," I replied, closing my laptop. I just stopped auditioning for a family that needed me voiceless.
She didn't respond.
Her eyes dropped to her hands, and for the first time, I saw the crack, not in control, but in certainty. As I left, the hallway echoed, hardwood floors, polished metal fixtures, and silence that no longer belonged to her. Silas waited by the elevator. He handed me a sealed folder. No smile. No words. Inside, a signed Westrix memo. Coraline Rhodes, interim CEO of Vital Metrics, under Westrix oversight. Below the text, one line in Silas's handwriting. Not a gift, a correction. I walked back to my new office. Larger.
Higher.
Quiet. I poured a glass of water, opened the windows, and for the first time since all of this began, I exhaled, not from survival, from arrival. The skyline blinked before me, and somewhere across the city, a server hummed. This time it held my name. They wanted me invisible, so I built something they couldn't ignore. The first sunrise in my new office broke over Seattle and painted the glass in gold, laying long stripes of light across my desk. I stood alone in that early silence, breathing in a kind of calm that once would have felt alien. Now, it was the armor I'd built for myself. From this height, the city seemed almost delicate. And yet every window, every light, every unseen desk in every unseen company, each one represented another version of who I might have become had I stayed silent. The transformation at Rivera Data was more than just a nameplate switch. The stale, tense hush of old Vital Metrics had given way to the kind of low, lively hum that comes when people are no longer afraid. Every morning, as I walked through the lobby, I saw conversations where there had once been whispers, genuine laughter where there used to be forced courtesy. The boardroom, where I'd once sat invisible and unheard, was now alive with challenge and debate, sunlight pouring in, digital dashboards scrolling with live project updates, bouquets on the credenza instead of discarded paper cups. Days bled into evenings as I worked on the company's first code of ethical collaboration, line by line, each clause built to make silence safe, not compulsory. For the first time, when voices disagreed, it was out loud, in the open, and with the knowledge that every idea was protected. The launch of the Code with Dignity scholarship marked a turning point. 4 young women stood with me on stage at the staff town hall, each one a bright point of possibility. The applause they received was thunderous, not just for them, but for every person in the audience who had ever questioned if they deserved to take up space. I told them and the whole company, you are not just recipients. You are proof that the future can belong to voices once overlooked. That night's town hall felt different even from the victory of the boardroom. There was electricity in the air, the excitement of change, the relief of survival, the curiosity of what might come next. I stood before my colleagues and said, "We don't erase voices here anymore. We don't reward silence with invisibility. We reward courage with respect." I watched faces shift. Surprise, hope, relief. An intern spoke up about her first month, about the weight she'd carried, then admitted she now led her own peer support group. An engineer I barely knew shared how he'd covered for Chandler out of fear, and how he decided, finally, that fear was finished. Afterward, as the room emptied, Silas found me on the balcony outside the boardroom. "You've turned the storm into a movement," he said, voice low, eyes on the city. "But storms don't end. They change the landscape." I nodded, feeling both the burden and the privilege. Late that night, as I poured a cup of tea in my office, I opened my inbox to a message from Jaleesa. The subject line was simple: "I owe you an apology." She wrote, "I never realized how much you carried alone. I'm sorry for everything. I hope you'll do better than we ever did." I didn't reply. Some endings are quieter than others. Some chapters close with silence, not forgiveness. A few days later, Maya dropped by with 2 mugs and a shy smile. We didn't talk about the past. Instead, she pointed out the new company poster in the hallway, bold text, "From invisible to invaluable." I poured her tea, no sugar, no milk, just as she liked. Before she left, she looked back at me and said, "You run this place now." I shook my head.
No.
We do. The next morning, I arrived before sunrise and walked the halls alone. The space felt lighter, laughter drifting from a team room, 2 junior analysts debating lines of code at the coffee machine. I paused in the boardroom, remembering every moment I'd ever been told I was too quiet, too difficult, too much. Now, even the air felt different. No edge of dread, just anticipation. I watched as Silas and Edric, heads together, finished reviewing the last policy draft. Silas glanced up, nodded, and I nodded back. Mutual trust, mutual vigilance. Before leaving that night, I lingered at my desk, wrote a single sentence in my journal. Truth doesn't need volume, just space. I closed the book and let my gaze wander out over the city. Its lights, its noise, its endless, hungry future. For once, I felt no need to steel myself against it. Just as I turned off my office light, my phone vibrated. A new message, flagged from the scholarship program. An applicant had written, "Thank you for making a place for us.
See you at the top."
I smiled and stepped into the hallway, letting the door close softly behind me. I used to think surviving the storm was the victory. Now I know. The real triumph is learning to command it. After everything, I stand in my own light, free, calm, and finally proud to be myself. The storm is past, and what remains is not just survival, but dignity restored. If my journey taught me anything, it's this: you can't silence the truth forever. Those who betray, exploit, or erase others will one day answer for their actions. But when you stand up for your worth, even quietly, you become impossible to ignore, and justice finds its way back to you. Have you ever felt invisible or been wronged by someone you trusted? How did you find your voice again? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience matters, and you never know who might find strength in your words. And if you want more stories about reclaiming power and finding your voice, don't forget to subscribe. Your next chapter could start here.